Have you ever stood in front of a rock that made you think, this was made by humans? Is it really possible? Not just big, so perfect, so huge, so unusual that even modern people feel uncomfortable standing in front of it, because there are some structures spread across the world that are not only history, they question our very idea of human intelligence, technology, and civilization. Just think. Thousands of years ago, when there were no modern cranes, no steel, no electricity, no computers, how did humans cut hundreds of tons of stones? How did they lift them up mountains? How did they fit them together so perfectly that even today a knife blade cannot be inserted? What's even stranger, Egypt on one side of the world, Peru on the other, Japan on the other, civilizations completely isolated from each other seem to have left traces of the same kind of impossible technology. Is this just a coincidence? Or are there some chapters in human history that we still don't fully understand? On today's journey, we will enter some of the places that many consider to be the most mysterious constructions in the world. Some places are so old that the Earth was still in the Ice Age when they were built. Some places are submerged under the sea, like the last vestiges of a lost civilization. And in some places, such perfect stone cuttings can be seen, which are difficult to make even with modern machines. But the scariest thing is that these are not fairy tales. They are real, and that reality makes the whole story even more uncomfortable. Because the deeper we go, the more it seems that the past may have been much more complicated than we thought. And this journey begins from the island of Java in Indonesia. For centuries, local people considered the Gunung Padang mountain to be a sacred place. They believed that the spirits of their ancestors lived here. From a distance, the place looks like an ordinary mountain, surrounded by trees, piles of stones, old steps. No one imagined that something could be hidden under this mountain, which would become one of the most controversial discoveries in history. Geologists began researching here in 2010. Their goal was to analyze earthquakes and volcanic activity, but when they scanned the ground with georadar, the instruments showed something that even they couldn't believe at first. A huge stone structure was visible under the mountain, as if the entire mountain was not natural, but rather standing on a huge man-made construction. The researchers probed deeper. Then came the information that exploded on the entire internet. Radiocarbon tests of organic matter found in the deep layers of the soil showed that some parts of this structure could be about 20,000 years old. 20,000 years. Stop for a moment and try to feel it. At that time, the Earth was going through an ice age. Mammoths roamed the Earth. The pyramids of Egypt were still thousands of years away in the future. And according to official history, humans were small hunter-gatherers who lived in caves. So the question begins here. If this structure is really that old, then who built it? How did they do it? Because 20,000 years ago, people were not as civilized as we imagine them to be to manage such a large project. They did not have agriculture, a state, or a system for organizing a large labor force. This is where the most popular theories of alternative history begin. Some said this was evidence of Atlantis. Some said that there was once a highly advanced civilization on Earth that was destroyed in a global catastrophe. Others claimed that aliens might have helped humans, because according to them, such construction should not have been possible in such ancient times. But when the tension subsided a little, geologists gave a more realistic explanation. They said that the stones used here are actually pillar basalt. The volcanic lava cools and naturally breaks into hexagonal pillars. In other words, nature itself created the shape of these stones. But the mystery does not end here, because the question now goes to another place. If the stones were created by nature, then how did people arrange thousands of heavy basalt pillars on the mountain? How were such huge steps created? Why did they do it? Because this was no small task. It is still difficult to build such a huge structure on a mountain without any modern equipment. And this is where Gunung Padang becomes not just a mysterious pyramid, but a terrifying example of the power of human organization. Just imagine a society that has no metal tools, no wheels, no engines. Yet they have continued to work in the same place for centuries, for a common purpose. Was it just religious belief, or something that we still don't understand? And this is where the whole story gets even stranger, because in Indonesia, people have used stones made by nature. But there is a place on the other side of the world where people didn't just use stone, they cut down whole mountains in a way that still makes modern engineers uncomfortable. And that place is Kailash Temple in India. When you first see the picture of this temple, your brain may not understand what you are seeing at first, because it is not an ordinary building. It is not made of blocks. It is not a temple on top of a hill. The entire temple is built out of a huge stone hill. From top to bottom, that means the workers first started cutting the top of the hill, then slowly went down. One mistake means the destruction of the entire establishment. No parts are replaceable. Imagine a sculptor making a statue from a small stone. Now multiply that idea a few thousand times. Huge pillar elephant statue, complex craft, hall room the stairs, and everything is part of the same stone. According to the calculations of scientists, about 2 lakh tons of stone had to be removed to build this temple. And the official history claims it was built in just 18 years. Is where the researchers stopped. Because the calculation says that if the work was really completed in 18 years, then dozens of tons of stone had to be cut every day, without a break, in extreme heat in monsoon for years. Not only that, it was accompanied by perfect planning and exquisite carving. One mistake and the whole structure is ruined. So how is it possible? From here, the story of lost technology begins again. Some claim that the ancient Indians had such instruments, which have been lost to history. Some say that stones were cut using sound. Some say again, such a perfect work is not possible for human beings. But engineers offer a more practical explanation. The greatest advantage of this construction, they said, was gravity. Huge stones like the pyramids did not have to be lifted up. Rather, the broken part would have fallen down on its own due to cutting from the top down, and ancient workers used wooden wedges, steel tools, and water to break the stone. Dry wood was inserted into the cracks of the rock and water was poured. Wood would swell and create enormous pressures, and stone would crack along certain lines. Sounds common, but when you look at the temple as a whole, the question still lingers. How? Because it's not just about power. There's planning that has amazed people for centuries. And the most frightening thing is that this is not the end of our journey, because ahead we are going to a place which was hidden under the sea for thousands of years, and what many call the Atlantis of Japan. The western end of Japan, hidden deep in the ocean, is a place that, at first glance, looks like a civilization suddenly submerged underwater, along with an entire city. And the strangest thing is that this discovery was not made by any archaeologist. It was found by an ordinary diver who just went looking for sharks. Year 1986. The sea around Yonaguni Island is still shrouded in mystery. Diving instructor Kihachiro Arataki was looking for a new diving spot where he could show hammerhead sharks to tourists. But shortly after going under the sea, he saw something that changed his whole life. In front of him rose a huge stone step from the sea floor. Perfect angle, equal platform. Levels like tall stairs. From a distance, the whole place looked like a sunken fortress or pyramid. And the most disturbing part, it didn't look very random. Nature's creations are usually chaotic, but a strange order was working here. Why are the steps so simple? Why are the corners so perfect? And where did these long, straight paths come from? When the news broke, the whole world became excited. Because if it really is man-made, then the entire timeline of human history collapses, because this structure is under the sea today, and before the last ice age sea level was much lower. That is, if it is man-made, it must be at least 10,000 years old. Think once thousands of years before the pyramids of Egypt, were people really building such huge structures by the sea? This is where the Atlantis of Japan theory begins. Many began to claim it was the remains of a lost civilization. Some say it is part of the legendary continent named Mu. Others believe that the world once had advanced civilizations that were destroyed by some natural disaster, because some things cannot be easily ignored. There are some round holes, which look like places where pillars are placed. In some areas there are cut marks, which do not look like normal corrosion. And when people stand under the sea and look at the huge steps, it really seems like it was the center of an ancient civilization. But scientists give another explanation. Geologists say the Yonaguni rocks are made of rocks that naturally break in straight lines due to tectonic stress. Over hundreds of years, ocean currents have eroded away the weak parts. As a result, large uniform stone layers are formed. That is, what we think of as stairs, may be the work of nature. But this is not where the whole mystery ends. Because even some skeptical researchers admit, maybe nature created the original structure, and ancient humans manipulated it. They may have evened out the corners. Some parts were cut. The natural platform was transformed into a religious site, or harbor. And this is where Yonaguni gets most unsettling, because you can never be completely sure what you're seeing. Nature, or the remains of a lost civilization. And maybe that uncertainty is what makes the whole place so eerie, because people are most afraid of the unknown. But the sea at least hides structures. The next place is even more eerie, because it's been underfoot for centuries, and no one knew it. The Cappadocia region of Turkey. From the outside, it looks like a typical mountainous area. Soft volcanic rock, small villages. But in 1963, a man was renovating his basement and found something that still gives people goosebumps. He was breaking down a wall. Suddenly, he heard a hollow sound behind him. Then a dark tunnel opened up. At first, he thought it might be a small cave. But after going inside, he saw that the tunnel went down further, and then down further, and then further. When the archaeologists got there, they realized that it wasn't just a cave. It is a completely underground city, named Derinkuyu. It extends 18 floors below. Imagine, an entire city underground. Thousands of people could live there. There were food storage areas, churches, schools, water wells, cattle sheds, cooking areas, and even a complex ventilation system. The scariest thing is that no one from above could have realized that a city was hidden below. But this is where the question begins. Why would people voluntarily live so deep underground? Without sunlight? In the dark? Without air? This is where the terrible theories begin. Some say that ancient people hid here to escape a global catastrophe. Some think they were afraid of something coming from the sky. Conspiracy theorists point to huge round stone doors. These doors weigh hundreds of kilos. If they are closed from the inside, it is almost impossible to open them from the outside. And the tunnels are so narrow that the enemy cannot enter together. The question is here, who were they so afraid of? But history gives a more realistic answer. This area was a battlefield for centuries. Invasions, massacres, looting. People built cities underground to survive. The volcanic tuff stone was soft and easy to cut, but it hardened in the air. As a result, the entire underground city became a huge fortress. When the enemy came, people would close the entrance and disappear. The army would pass above, and thousands of people would live silently below. But this is where Derinkuyu becomes more terrifying than just a secret city, because it proves how far ancient people could go just to survive. They built entire civilizations underground, with plans that even modern people are surprised to see. And this is where the atmosphere of the whole story begins to change, because now we are not just seeing mysterious structures. We are starting to see a different form of people. People who had limited technology, but extraordinary willpower. And the next place will make this idea even heavier. Because there, people didn't just cut mountains, they built stone cities in the middle of the sea, a city that many still consider cursed, and the name of that city is Nan Madol. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, hidden among numerous small islands, there is a place that at first glance seems to have been created not by humans, but by some strange force. Because there is not just stone here. There is an impossible weight, an unusual plan, and a silence that makes people feel uneasy for no reason. Pohnpei, a small island in Micronesia, surrounded by blue sea, dense jungle, and broken black walls. But the locals still believe in one thing. You should not stay in the ruins of Nan Madol after the sun sets, because according to them, the spirits of ancient rulers still roam there when night falls. Nan Madol seems incredible in the light of day, but in the darkness of night, the place changes completely. The broken walls look like a grave. When you hear the sound of the wind in the canal water, it seems like someone is whispering. And this atmosphere has made the place known as the City of the Dead for centuries. But the most terrifying aspect of Nan Madol is not the ghost story, it's engineering. Because the entire city is built on water. It is not an ordinary fishing village. It is a collection of 92 artificial islands, which are connected by canals. Many call it the Venice of the Pacific. But instead of the beauty of Venice, there is a strange hidden fear here. Huge black walls stand out on the water, and these walls are made of thousands of basalt stone pillars. Each pillar weighs from a few tons to 50 tons. Now imagine a small island where there are no modern machines, no metal technology, no wheels. Yet people brought such huge stones to the middle of the sea and built an entire city. Why? This is where the researchers stop, because the total weight of Nan Madol is estimated to be about 750,000 tons. To understand this number, think about it. It is close to the amount of stone in the Great Pyramid of Giza, but Egypt had a huge empire. Millions of workers, a strong economy, and here, a small island society. The population is very small, so how did they do it? This is where the legend is born. Local stories say that two wizard brothers came here from a faraway land. They had strange powers. They would sing and make the huge stones float in the air. It sounds unreal, but when people can't find a realistic explanation, then stories start to be born, and this is where the whole thing gets even weirder. Because the compass still behaves abnormally around Nan Madol. Some researchers have also mentioned strange magnetic deviations, and this is where conspiracy theories explode. Some say it was an alien power center. Some say the basalt pillars are part of some ancient technology. When viewed from above, the layout of the entire city looks really strange, like a complex circuit board. But scientists again give a realistic explanation. They say that the islanders used the sea. Huge wooden rafts were made, then the basalt pillars were tied to the rafts and floated on the water. The effective weight of the stones in the water decreased. As a result, it was possible to transport them slowly, and they would arrange the pillars one on top of the other to build walls. It sounds logical, but the question does not end here, because the most frightening discovery comes later. Researchers understand that Nan Madol may not be a temple. It was a prison of power. The Saudala dynasty forced local chieftains to live on this island with their families. Although it looked like an honor, they were actually prisoners, because this artificial island had no water of its own. It was not possible to produce food. Everything had to be brought in from the mainland. That means that if the ruler wanted to, he could control the entire elite class by cutting off food. Suddenly, the meaning of the entire city changed. It was no longer just an engineering marvel. It was a terrible symbol of control over people. And this is where the whole story gets even heavier, because on one side of the world, people are building stone cities on the sea. On the other side, people are building 18-story cities underground. And now we are going to a place where the stone has been cut in a way that even with modern machines seems uncomfortably perfect. Egypt. But this time it is not the pyramids, because everyone knows the pyramids of Giza. The real discomfort is hidden deep in the ground, the Serapeum of Saqqara. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary archaeological site, but once you go inside, it feels like you have entered another world underground. Dark corridors, cold air, and those huge black granite boxes. These are called sarcophagi, but the problem is, they are not like ordinary coffins. Each weighs about 100 tons, and it's not just the outer size. The perfect polish inside makes the whole mystery terrifying. When researchers examined the surface with a laser measuring device, it was seen that the inner walls were almost perfectly even. The angles were a perfect 90 degrees. Even with today's modern equipment, it is extremely difficult to work inside such a large granite block like this. And this is where the question begins: how? Because according to official history, the ancient Egyptians had copper tools and stone hammers, but granite is one of the hardest stones in the world. So how did they do such a perfect cutting? This is where the theory of lost technology begins. Some say they used some unknown tool. Some say it was advanced vibration technology. Others think we have lost a large part of history. But the most uncomfortable thing is, how were these huge boxes brought underground? The corridors are so narrow that it is difficult to insert large tools even today. And yet, people have lowered hundreds of tons of granite blocks down, placed them, and put 30 tons of lids on top. When you stand in that dark corridor, you get the feeling that perhaps we judge the past too easily, because these places are not just structures. They are evidence of a power of humans that we do not fully understand. And this is where the most uncomfortable part of the whole story slowly becomes clear. In different parts of the world, unrelated civilizations have repeatedly created things that still make us uneasy today. Is it just a coincidence? Or are there some lost chapters in human history that are still hidden somewhere in the world? And the most weighty answer to that question may be waiting in the next place, where the entire mountain was carved from a single piece of stone. And when you stand in front of that place, it seems that people could sometimes think of the impossible naturally. And this is where the whole story becomes even heavier. Because what we have seen so far are not just different mysteries. These are different forms of the same question. The huge structures hidden under the mountains of Indonesia, the strange steps submerged under the Sea of Japan, the lost city deep in the ground of Turkey, the stone city standing on water in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and that impossibly perfect granite box in Egypt. These places, spread from one end of the world to the other, create the same feeling. Could humans really have done so much? Because we usually like to think of history as a straight line, as if people in the past were less developed, then civilization gradually advanced, technology came, and today we have reached the most advanced state. But the problem is, these structures break that simple story, because the deeper you look, the more it seems that the past may have been much more complex than we thought. And perhaps the most uncomfortable thing is, the ancient people were not primitive. They did not have smartphones, they did not have computers, they did not have the internet. But they had something that the modern world is slowly losing: patience, organization, and a goal for which they were ready to work for generations. Because one thing we must not forget, these huge structures were not built in a day. Maybe one person started the work, but didn't see it through to the end, then his children continued the work, then another generation. That is, they were working for a future that they would not even see with their own eyes. In today's world, we get bored of waiting, even for a few seconds. Yet thousands of years ago, people built structures that are still standing today. And this is where the question becomes deeper. If their technology was so limited, then how did they plan so perfectly? How did they move such huge stones? How did unrelated civilizations in different parts of the world build similar impossible structures? Is it just human ingenuity? Or are there parts of history that are still not fully understood? Because the world has proven one thing over and over again: the more we think we know everything, the more something new comes out that shakes old ideas. Maybe a lost city is still hidden under the sands of the desert. Maybe there are traces of a civilization buried at the bottom of the sea that history has never written about. Maybe there is a structure still sleeping deep in the mountains that will one day force the whole world to question again. And perhaps the scariest thing is, we haven't lost the past. We've just forgotten. We've forgotten how impossible things can be when our goal is not just to survive, but to leave our own existence etched in time. This is why these places attract people so much, because they're not just stones. They strike at people's imagination. They force us to think, what if the past was different than we thought? What if the ancient world had some knowledge or technique that we don't yet have the full picture of? And this is where the most uncomfortable feeling in this story arises. Because maybe we don't know everything about history. Maybe there were chapters before our civilization, only broken pieces of which still lie in different parts of the world. And we can look at them and ask only one question: how? Maybe we'll never know the full answer to this question. But maybe that's where the real power of mystery lies, because the purpose of some mysteries isn't to give answers, to make people think. And this is why history is never truly dead, because the past still speaks to us, sometimes through broken stones, sometimes through dark tunnels, through steps that once sank under the sea. And those silent words are perhaps the most powerful. So now the question is for you. Which of these mysterious places today made you feel the most uneasy? Which structure made you think, this was really possible? Just write the name of the place in the comments. And write which country you are watching this video from. I want to see from which corners of the world people are still experiencing these dark mysteries of history. And if you love to know about lost civilizations, impossible constructions, and the strangest real mysteries of the world, then subscribe to the channel now. Because ahead we will enter more places where reality itself sounds like a fairy tale.